and welcome to episode 103 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, the world is ending. Fortunately, one of us is broadcasting from an actual bomb shelter.
The latest IPCC climate report from the UN is out, and it's horrible. Did I mention my bomb shelter includes a very expensive espresso machine?
Electric car charging stations in Russia have been hacked to display the message, Putin is a dickhead. I don't really have a joke here. I just like saying, Putin is a dickhead.
And finally, we unveil plans to fight fascism using electric heat pumps. Spoiler alert, we're going to build a really big one and hide an army inside of it.
All that and more in this apocalyptic edition of the Clean Energy Show.
So, James, I have an update on the trip that I'm planning to take to Toronto.
Okay, in your Model 3 all-electric vehicle.
Yeah. And you were imploring me to stop in Fort Frances, Ontario, the place of your birth.
Correct.
Where I imagine I'll see the plaque and the statue and everything.
Certainly. There should be a welcome sign, I assume.
But Google Maps, all the planning software is telling me to bypass Fort Frances and take the Highway 17. So I'm not going to go by Fort Frances.
But no one does. It's the home of banning plastic straws and cutlery in Canada. How could you not go there as a clean energy expert?
Yeah, well, it turns out it is out of the way. Like you take a steep right turn, go straight south, and then you go east again. But the Highway 17 it goes above all that, and it's a shorter route.
By how much?
Well, I didn't calculate it.
Well, is it 2 kilometers? Because sometimes it's 2 kilometers. It's like half a mile. Come on.
I'll check it. If it's only a couple kilometers, I will.
That's all you're willing to do, to go to the birthplace of James Whittingham is a couple kilometers out of your way. It's probably a better highway. There's probably nicer lodging and better places to put your stool.
It is the number one highway that goes through Fort Frances, but the number one highway in that part of the world is often, just kind of a goat path. So
a goat path. Well, I was born on a goat path then, I guess. Brian, I learned with all this going on in the world that I didn't realize this. One of the oligarchs, you know what an oligarch is?
Sure.
An oligarch is a person who jumped on, steel mills and things when the Soviet Union fell, and they were lent money for shares and became billionaires. And they have billionaire yachts. Well, one of these bastards is Roman Abramovich, who owns the steel mill a couple blocks away from me. Like right down the street. I could smell it. I can hear it.
Wow.
It's a freaking, and there's two other oligarchs that own it. So it's owned by oligarchs. Russian oligarchs has come to James's backyard. Well, it's been that way for a while, but they're a big employer in town, and they're sponsoring everything. There's Evraz Place. There's which is a big community hub in the city. Well, I was thinking, they've lost 70% of their value this month, or not this month, but last month, because we just started a new month. But yeah, maybe they'll go out of business, because you know what they do? They make pipelines often.
Yeah.
Nobody likes pipelines on this show. One more thing, though. The Chevy Bolt, a U.S. user group I joined by accident while I'm staying there, it was so much bigger than the Canadian one. And that's very different. People are talking about getting into fights and cutting people off. The Americans are animals. You're animals down there. What the hell? It's not the polite, techie kind of user group in Canada. But I'm trying to learn about the Bolt, which I'm going to buy, to see if I should know anything. And there's a few things.
It's all passive aggressive up here in Canada.
Yeah. Anything to do with your Tesla?
Right. So full self-driving beta is coming to Canada. And just this morning, I finally got the software update that allowed me to request it. So 2022.4.5.4. Okay. Finally installed it this morning. So then I was able to request to get on the list for full self-driving beta.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to also provide like that safety score software, but I haven't found that yet or figured out how that works.
Well, you have to. We need to know. I'm dying here to know what your score is.
I should have an update by next week. And then I was thinking, hopefully, maybe I can even drive to Toronto, full self-driving. Maybe the car will take me to Fort Francis.
I'm going to instruct it to drop you off there into a bin. How dare you put down my city of birth? I'm going to bypass North Battleford next time I go through there. I'm sure there's a way. Take a dirt road if I have to.
I still have to figure out the safety score thing, but I was doing a bit of driving today after I did the update, and I remembered, oh, wait, I've got to drive super carefully in case it's checking my safety score.
Is the only acceptable score at this point. So 60 people in our country have just got it. It's the first country outside the United States. And Musk says he's planning on expanding that this week. So you could be the one, Brian. You could be the one.
Yeah, well, lots of people have the same update that I have. So it's going to track everyone's safety scores for a couple of weeks or something. And then presumably they'll start giving us the software.
So sweet, although I'm kind of pessimistic. I think you too many hard braking. I don't trust your driving. I don't.
Okay.
I mean, you're sober most of the time, but I can't say that, you need 100%. I've seen other people with 100%. You need 100%. No hard braking, no sudden moves.
Yes,
and you drink a lot
if I am
espresso.
a terrible driver, I'm the perfect candidate. I need the car to drive better for me.
Okay. What else is new? Let's see here. I saw something on the internet. You know how you were talking a few episodes ago about car lots in the States in San Francisco saying no Chevy Bolts, please. So Chevy Bolt, they've come up with a sticker to put on the car to assure everybody. Well, yeah. I saw one. I don't know how I came across this, but it was in Raleigh, North Carolina, a parking deck for a shopping mall. So basically a parkade, as we would call it locally. One level of the parking lot. And it said, due to safety recall involving fires, the following year and model of vehicles are prohibited from parking at this facility until further notice. You've got the Chevy Bolts, of course, but you also got the Hyundai Santa Fe, which is just a nice vehicle, right? It's just those have been recalled.
There was, I guess, some fire issues with that.
Yeah, so a few Hyundais, though the ones with the ICE vehicles have been not allowed to park. Hey, that's fair. I just noticed that. I just realized that's fair. It's equality amongst cars now. It's not just the EVs that are getting called out. Perhaps they listen to the show. A lot of powerful people listen to the show, so who knows?
Yeah.
So SpaceX, we're going to get into the horrible things that are happening in the world, or I guess through Musk, has somehow delivered a truckload of Starlink dishes to the Ukraine. Can you tell us why that might be important?
Well, anytime there's massive conflict going on or bad things going on, internet's really important to keep people connected. And once there's a war going on, you can't always get on the internet or stay on the internet. You depend upon the infrastructure of, your local city or community or whatever. But if you've got a Starlink satellite dish, they've turned on coverage for Ukraine. They've delivered a bunch of these dishes. So theoretically, people in Ukraine are going to be able to access internet through this strife that they weren't able to before.
You think it's going to be the average person, or are they going to give it to soldiers or maybe government people?
Yeah, no, I have no idea how they're going to handle that.
Because right now the internet still works. I mean, they bombed the TV tower just now. Yay for them. So, Brian, we're going to have a big discussion this week on the Russian war on Ukraine and how clean energy ties into that, because the world is beholden to Russia for natural gas and regular oil, I guess, right?
Yeah, although it sounds like natural gas in Europe is one of the biggest things.
So there's been all kinds of pieces written about this in major newspapers. I found one in the Times. You found a couple in the Guardian. Yeah, so the headline in the LA Times is one way to combat Russia, move faster on clean energy. So Germany is really dependent on natural gas, right? I mean, they're remember we were just talking just last week about how they're shutting down their nuclear reactors out of, fear, I guess.
Yeah, although that could end up making them more dependent on natural gas that comes from Russia, which suddenly nobody wants for some reason.
Now, you might say maybe they should turn off the delay the nuclear decommissioning, but apparently it's not easy. There'd be a lot of lawsuits involved, and a lot of expense and a lot of questions about that. So it's not an easy given thing to do. And sounds like they're not going to do that.
Yeah, that's too bad. But yeah, I mean, just turning off a nuclear power plant. I mean, I assume you got to plan it like years in advance. They're so complicated.
I just flipped the switch. Well, we're done with you.
Yeah. And you can't just, wait, and turn the switch back on.
Yeah, that would be bad. Germany would like to import liquefied natural gas elsewhere, but a lack of a terminal in the country is causing problems. They won't be able to handle liquid natural gas or LNG imports. LNG supplies would be able to fully replace Russian gas. It's also an expensive alternative, as you can imagine, shipping the gas in instead of pipelining it from your neighboring country. So gas already comes in from Norway, but those supplies cannot be increased. It is already producing at its capacity. A reminder that liquid natural gas is super chilled gas. So what they do is they condense it by cooling it into a liquid form, then throw it on these big vats on a ship, and they regasify it at, it sounds like something have to be in taco time of the weekend, at specialist terminals. They regasify the gas. And Russia exports between 150 billion and 190 billion cubic meters of gas to Europe each year, typically fulfilling 30 to 40% of the demand across the continent. The whole continent is that much dependent on Russian natural gas. They didn't learn anything when they went into Crimea. That's kind of a pisser, I'm mad about that. A lot of people didn't learn anything. I'm sorry. Here we go. The son of a bitch poisons his opposition leader, walks into Crimea, takes in territories, and we don't do anything about it. And guess what happens? You don't do anything, then, he's emboldened. If there's one guy living in a bunker, and by the way, he is a cowardly little man. Talk about your social distancing. They've had to build him bigger tables so he can distance himself away from the next person. It's like a city block away for the next guy at the table. You cowardly little man.
I have
Putin.
that in my dining room too, so I can stay away from my family.
Well, you need a big space. So Putin, if you're listening, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to come after you in your sleep, and I'm going to kill you.
I think you're going to get us in trouble with the podcast police.
Oh no. It's Putin.
Oh, so it's okay?
Yeah, it's okay if you kill Putin.
Okay.
There's laws everywhere, written and unwritten, that you can kill despots. So screw him. Yeah, Putin's an idiot. He's a cowardly little man. And so the U.S., Qatar, and Australia are the biggest exporters of natural gas, and Qatar is willing to increase its LNG supplies to Europe, which is fine, but it's also Qatar. On paper, Europe has a capacity to import an extra 147 billion cubic meters of LNG a year, according to analysts at Wood Mackenzie. And that's enough to replace the Russian pipeline stuff in its entirety. I don't know what's going to happen. Do you think they're going to shut down the pipeline once things get ugly? And they're getting ugly. It's
hard to imagine. And of course, we're obviously big proponents of clean energy on this show. And obviously the solution is to switch to clean energy. And then really every country on Earth can have energy independence and not have to worry about these kinds of issues. But sadly, we all still need to heat our homes. And
it shouldn't be 30-40% dependent on Russia for gas. Not when there's alternatives.
It is surprising, yes.
That's stupid. It's your own fault, Europe. Especially after what happened in Crimea in 2014 and everything else that's happened since. Come on. You're taking the easy way out. You deserve this. Is karma. That's what this is. So we have to do better. Europe is going to go to green energy. They're going to go to heat pumps for hot water and home heating. They're going to have to increase insulation. Do it now. Do it right freaking now, like the world depends on it, because it does. And people in the States have called on Biden to sort of have a big sweeping legislation for American manufacturers to start doing that. If they did, that would bring down the price for when America makes its transition. The technology in volume would be improving the technology and lowering the cost of it. So, yeah, the German Minister of Finance is called renewables freedom energy. And I, Brian Stockton, think he's right. And that was in his latest parliamentary address not long ago. So the switch could take at least a decade in practice, not least due to the fact of the onward infrastructure, not in the right place. Germany, Europe's biggest gas market, has no LNG import terminals, as I said, so they have to build that. You can't build that quickly. Ports are not an easy thing, so...
Yeah, well, energy independence is obviously super important, but it kind of relates to all the trouble we've been having in Canada lately, too, because Canadians also feel like energy independence is super important. And of course, we produce a lot of our own oil and gas, but it's for whatever reason, in many quarters of the earth, energy independence and being self-reliant is associated almost solely with fossil fuels. So a lot of the rhetoric around Canadian freedom and being energy independent is really tied to the fossil fuel industry. But, we need to obviously switch that. Everybody can be energy independent using clean energy. And it's not just the places lucky enough to have oil on their property.
There's been a lot of talk about long distance transmission of clean electricity, like Australia is getting some and sending some to another far, like Singapore, right?
Through the ocean.
So those are just like pipelines. They're more instantaneous. And I've heard people advocate for making a bunch of solar in Arizona and piping it to Canada for the winter, and having a big DC transmission line at, huge expense and even environmental costs, because you have to go through land and disrupt things. But what happens if something happens politically in the States compared to Canada, or vice versa? I mean, you kind of want to keep these things local, although it's very convenient not to. But there's still that issue with clean energy, remarkably.
Yeah, although, whatever tools you have. And yeah, it's probably better if the North American grid is all connected and we do share our energy back and forth across borders. It is probably in every country's interest to be fully independent, so you don't have to take the chance of somebody crazy getting in power.
So Leonard Burnham, the CEO of Germany's biggest gas and electricity provider, E.ON, said that while electricity supplies for this winter were secure, next year could be more of a challenge. If Russian gas imports were to break down completely, the immediate effect wouldn't be so dramatic, as we're almost at the end of the heating season. But next winter could be the case of something different. Be hard to meet the demands of the industrial customers, and some of them may even have to turn off their power from time to time. So it is utopian to believe that Russian gas can be completely replaced one day to the next by other sources, said D. He told Die Zeit, which is the Times, I believe. So I don't know. They can't temporarily restart the nuclear reactors. And like I said, they're saying that it was politically suicidal in Berlin. I don't understand Berlin. Like, I'm not really pro-nuclear. I don't think you are. But they're really against it. Like, there's something about in the culture that sort of got seeded in the 70s during the 3 Mile Island was the name of the reactor in the States.
US,
yeah. After that, things changed in Germany, and then Fukushima happened, and it was let's get out as fast as possible.
We were talking about France a couple of weeks ago, and France is way more pro-nuclear for whatever reason. They've had a lot of it, and they haven't had any disasters, I guess. So there's a lot of French pride around their safe nuclear power.
Yeah, and they're right next door. So what's up with that?
It's like they speak a whole different language.
But still, I think France is 70% nuclear, so they still need gas, they still need stuff. There's no evidence of ordinary Germans panicking, says the article. Though heating installation companies say there has been a considerable increase in inquiries about heat pumps from people keen to find the alternative to natural gas. That should be a priority. I don't care what happens in Ukraine from now on, from this moment forward. Heat pump, heat pump, heat pump, everywhere. Here, there, United States. Let's get going on heat pumps, because why wait? They do exist. Is there any reason not to, Brian?
No, there's not. And, we've been doing this podcast for 2 years now, and I feel like heat pumps barely came up in conversation, even just 2 years ago. And now things have changed so quickly. It's becoming very clear, very apparent that electric heat pumps air source, ground source heat pumps are going to be vital to the future. Bill McKibben, the noted environmentalist who we've mentioned on the show before, he has a blog on Substack. And he's suggesting that the U.S. should use the Defense Production Act to start making heat pumps for Eastern Europe. Like, this is, instead of making bombs, basically, instead of fighting Putin with bombs, let's fight him with heat pumps. So the Defense Production Act has been actually used a couple of times recently to make both ventilators for the COVID crisis and I believe also to make masks. This is a way that the U.S. government can essentially force industry to do its bidding and make it, not for free. They're sort of awarded a government contract. But it's a great out of the box kind of idea that if the U.S. suddenly started building heat pumps by the millions and shipping them to Eastern Europe and helping this transition, it absolutely reduces Putin's power.
But your average American voter won't understand any of this unless they listen to the show, and there's a few that do. It's got to happen. It's got to happen now. And they're not giving away the heat pumps. So you're not giving away. You're just incentivizing a company to make them and helping with the logistics and all that. But there'll be profit for everybody. And
you could never switch all of them overnight anyway. So it's going to be a process of generally replacing the oldest furnaces and boilers first. It's going to be a long, slow process no matter what you do.
You know, for people who are new to this, and there are some people who listen to our show who are just dipping their feet in the waters of clean energy, a heat pump is a reverse air conditioner that is much, much more efficient than any other electrical heating, which is why we don't use electrical heating. If possible, use natural gas whenever possible, because it's cheaper and a lot more energy produced by that.
Yeah, but if you switch your electric heating to a heat pump electric heater, then suddenly it gets way more efficient. And, this is the thing that really the entire world is basically going to be switching to eventually as we get off fossil fuels.
Now, it can be a bit problematic in a place where we live, where we still have about 45% coal. That's the problem. The idea, though, is everywhere, including here, is going green. They're going to clean energy and 100% at some point. So the grid gets cleaner continually, no matter where you live. Yeah. No, there's always an argument of, I drive an electric car, but of course our electricity is generated by coal, which is not ideal. But the alternative is to do nothing. And that's not an alternative. So we got to start switching all this stuff, and the grid gets cleaner every year, even around here. So the idea is that by 2040, 2050, everybody's got fuel-efficient houses, well-insulated, and heat pumps, heating the water, heating the house, and it's coming from a very 100%, 99% clean grid of wind turbines, batteries, and solar panels, and, a little mix of everything else, some hydro and all that. So the Nord Stream 2 pipeline has been canceled. That was a 1,230-kilometer long natural gas pipeline under the Baltic Sea running from Russia to Germany's Baltic coast, and it runs parallel to an earlier Nord Stream pipeline, which is why it's called number 2, and it would double the capacity to 100 billion cubic meters of gas a year. And European nations were making plans to cut their reliance on energy exports from Russia. The country supplies more than a quarter of Europe's oil and nearly 40% of its natural gas, so we've said. So the Russian aggression has sped up the EU's plans. I hope, Brian, that it has. And officials are expected to release a strategy next week for reducing the continent's use of fossil fuels by 40% over 8 years and ramping up non-polluting energy sources. We will be covering that and looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, maybe it's helpful to have, to put a face to this. Of course, it's been difficult to convince all the governments of the world and all the people of the world that climate change is a real thing and we have to get on this. But I don't know, maybe it's, I think Putin probably made an error in judgment that, this is going to just accelerate the transition to clean energy, and he's not going to have the power.
He's made an error in so many ways, He didn't. He's reunited. He's united the world. Ukraine is going to join the EU the second it can, And Finland is going to join NATO, and it's just the opposite of everything he wanted is happening.
Yeah.
And
then why did he do it?
Because he's a Hitler in a bunker. He's gone. I think COVID isolated him. It's made us all a little crazy. If you started as a dictator to begin with, you go maybe a little more crazy. You know what I'm saying? That just is a theory.
Yeah, he should just, step down and start a podcast.
About what? The people he's killed? Screw you, Putin. I know you're listening. Screw you. May your bunker be filled with farts from Ukraine. Let's see here. Sarah Lindish-Law, managing director of the climate think tank RMI, thinks a prolonged conflict between Russia and Ukraine is more likely to accelerate the transition. And oil staying above or near $100 a barrel for a protracted period of time makes renewable investment look better, she said. If the price environment and the strategic conflict last just a bit longer, I think it drives people to find alternatives. And that's hilarious because we live in two oil provinces here. Of Canada, who are basically Putins when it comes to their petrol. They'll do anything to make money off their petrol, and they take money from the petrol companies, the oil companies, for their bank accounts to fund their campaigns. Yeah, it's hilarious. They're so happy. Oil's back, and it's like going to stay here forever, and we're going to thrive, and the streets are going to be paved in gold. And no, everyone's going to buy an EV.
Ironic, too, that there's a large Ukrainian population here where we live, and they're not too happy about this. But hey, the price of oil's up.
Yay. So no gas. This is something I thought about, Brian, because if you watch the news, they're out of gas in Kyiv.
And I will add, too, I'm still taking a mental health break from the news.
I know. I thought this might be this whole thing might be a shock to you once I revealed it to you. It's like
some of this is new information, but when something this large is happening, it's impossible to block it all out. So I have a vague sense of what's going on in Ukraine.
So they're out of gas in the Ukraine. So I wondered, of course, how many EVs are there, and could somebody be, because the electrical system, as of publication of our podcast, was still working. And of course, if you had to place the solar panels, you could charge up and do things like that. But the answer is there's actually 30,000 electric vehicles, which is not many. It's only about 1%. But most of them, basically 6 out of 7 are imported used vehicles. There's a lot of Nissan Leafs, for example, so the range isn't going to be great. And I noticed there's a lot of Teslas, but no Tesla, infiltration into the Ukrainian market, no superchargers, no store, no official Tesla. And they've been getting lobbied by all the Tesla owners there. They made this really slick video. I'm not going to play a clip of it, because it's all music, but it's very slick. And it seems like there's hundreds of them. They just parade down the highway, and there's, it's like Russian convoys. It's Tesla after Tesla after Tesla. And they're all made it for Elon Musk to see and start. And I guess they were thinking about it. But at least he sent some Starlink stuff there, because, the average Ukrainian makes less than $600 per month. And that's why EVs aren't a lot of things there. Newspapers that reported on this locally said that charging cable theft was a problem. And I noticed that it's 377 kilometers from Kyiv to the Romanian border, where a lot of people are evacuating. But if you got no gas, it's interesting how maybe somebody might be using an EV in Ukraine right now. And by the way, they even had incentives. They had incentives coming, including a reduction in tariffs to import them and support of charging infrastructure, which is more than we have here, where you and I live. Poor Ukraine, where the average income was that, and they were able to do that and think that far ahead. So Tesla, as you know, has been offering free supercharging outside Ukraine.
Yeah, so there's no superchargers directly in Ukraine, apparently, but the surrounding countries, they have offered not only free supercharging to help people get around if they're trying to escape conflict, but they've been able to open it up to non-Tesla vehicles. So they've started doing this as pilot projects in the Netherlands and in Norway. The Tesla superchargers have traditionally just been for Tesla cars, but now they have software that opens it up. So yeah, not only is the charging free, but they've opened it up to any and all makes of cars. You just need probably the app and then the right connector to make sure it'll connect to your car.
All right, Brian, I'm going to segue into something that is kind of related to this. The U.S. Army is reducing its carbon output by planning on electrification of many of its vehicles. And I had some interesting data here that I wanted to share with you. Thinking about, because the Russian tanks are running out of gas.
Oh, yeah.
They're also falling off bridges in large numbers. I saw a thread of all the tanks and armored vehicles that fell off bridges, because I guess a lot of these conscripts were not very well trained, and that's sad. They're as old as my kid, and they're sent on. They weren't even told they were going to war, and then when they were, they told that they were going to be welcomed with open arms.
Well, I guess you could tell me anything, and I would have to believe you.
Yeah, because you're not really part of the outside world.
I'm just here in my bomb shelter.
By the way, I've been elected King of Sweden.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I may not be here every week. There might be somebody replacing me. So yeah, they've got a climate action plan to reach net zero. This is the U.S. Army by 2050. And I found some ways here that would benefit them, because I was listening to the Energy Gang podcast, one of my favorite clean energy podcasts. This is a bit into the weeds for most people, perhaps, but Joshua Rhodes, a professor at the University of Texas, had some numbers that he relayed, and I thought they were interesting, so I'm going to read them to you. The Army spends a lot of money and person power to get their fuels to where they need to use them. They pay $2 to $3 per gallon of fuel, like gas or diesel. But to get that fuel to the forward operating basis, it can take up to $400 a gallon. Think about that. You're in Afghanistan. There is electricity. You can plug in and charge. It is possible. Not everywhere. It's not always reliable to have electricity, especially in wars themselves. But I'm just saying, $400 a gallon. And it costs 25 gallons of fuel per soldier per day in Afghanistan. That's what it was. So that's $10,000 per day per soldier just for fossil fuel. That's just for fossil fuels.
Crazy.
That's not, security, safety, or anything like that, or equipment. So 60,000 troops are dedicated just to delivering fuel to U.S. soldiers. That's an entire army in itself.
And this relates to the other Bill McKibben blog post that we talked about a few weeks ago, which is 40% of the world's shipping in total is just moving fossil fuels around. So, the U.S. Army, like a country unto itself, probably 40% of their shipping is all just fossil fuel.
So fuel delivery by convoy makes for easy targets, obviously. Half the deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan were due to convoys being bombed, and many of the convoys were used for fuel transport. So it's not only money and fuel and environment, it's human lives, which is the most important thing to talk about. So that's pretty serious. Other ICE engines issues include noisy engines and fuel that can ignite when a vehicle is damaged or disabled quite easily, often with deadly consequences. So in the case of Russian tanks, you can see the plumes of black smoke they belch out. You haven't been watching, but they are. They belching out, literally belching large plume. They like smoke signals, like "come get me," because they have the noise. You can sneak up on people when it's electric. So to address the massive consumption of fuel at its installations, the U.S. Army will replace its light non-tactical fleet with electric vehicles in the next 5 years, while all non-tactical vehicles are replaced by 2035. And a lot of these vehicles are out of date, and they're killing some of their soldiers. So I saw a 60 Minutes piece on that recently. Mobile nuclear reactors might be used, as well as solar microgrids. If you're wondering how they would charge an electrified fleet, they would take a reactor out of a nuclear sub, put it on a truck, and, that would be assumably easier than driving a whole bunch of tankers across a desert.
No, and I wanted to mention something that you slipped into the podcast last week, that the University of Saskatchewan near us, you said that they had a small nuclear reactor. And I didn't know about this, but I did a quick
You
Google,
never heard of it before?
I vaguely remembered it after I sort of searched it. But what it is a Slowpoke 2 research reactor. And it's only 20 kilowatts.
Yeah.
It's like it's a tiny little.
What's your solar panel installation peak?
And I've got 8.6 kilowatts. So it only makes, as much power as maybe my house and your house and another person's house.
Do you remember what year it was made? Did you find that information? It's been a while since they've had it. I think it's a...
Yeah, 1981 it started.
Oh, God. I was so young then. Barely hair beyond my head. I mean, I was just such a little boy at that time. That's a long time ago. And did they decommission it? I thought I heard something
as far as I know,
that.
it's still operating, but
20 kilowatt reactor. I mean, what's the point? I mean, all the effort to keep it going for 40 years, 41 years. It's mind blowing for 20 kilowatts.
Yeah,
because it must have taken money to do that. You can't just turn it on and walk away from a nuclear reactor. You gotta treat it nicely. So there's other things. I've seen this something else that the company that contracts to the U.S. Army is doing. They've got sort of like truck containers, like storage containers on trucks, shipping containers rather. They're probably 2/3 format, and they have a large solar array that comes out and expands, kind of like a transformer. Oh, and by the way, a lot of the, almost all of the gas companies have left Russia. BP, Exxon, Equinor, the Norwegian oil company, is exiting Russia. And they're going to lose billions of dollars in valuation because of it for doing that. Volkswagen also said that it would suspend operations at factories in Eastern Europe because they're not getting parts from the Ukraine, because the Ukraine was making parts for electric vehicles. There you go. Electric vehicles in Ukraine, a growing thing. So GM and others have stopped shipments as well. I should send them all the unfixed Chevy Bolts to Russia and let them go on fire.
Yeah. Just put them in drive and
send them to the Kremlin.
Yeah.
That's another thing. With the technology of self-driving, some of these things will be able to drive themselves to the battlefield. And I don't want any more damn wars. But, we're going back in time here, Brian. I'm sorry.
And then the other part of the story was that Tesla, as we said, has opened up their chargers surrounding Ukraine. But in the meantime, a lot of the EV chargers in Russia have been hacked, presumably by Anonymous. This is the general feeling. And so a lot of the EV chargers in Russia are not working right now because they've been hacked, and they are putting anti-Putin messages up on the displays that show up on these electric car chargers.
You sure it wasn't the Kremlin who did it? They're not too happy with electric cars.
Yeah, that could be, yeah.
No, they wouldn't allow a message against Putin. Putin is a dickhead. That is what it says, and also glory to Ukraine. And I would have to reiterate that here for the show. All right, Brian, if it wasn't bad enough already, if things weren't crappy as you've come out of your shelter into the world to see what's going on, the UN released another climate report, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC. Their sixth report is out, and it is on the the impact that climate change is going to have on us. Here's the UN Secretary General.
Dear representatives of the media, I've seen many scientific reports in my time, but nothing like this. Today's IPCC report is an atlas of human suffering and a damning indictment of failed climate leadership. With fact upon fact, this report reveals how people on the planet are getting clobbered by climate change. Nearly half of humanity is living in the danger zone now, Many ecosystems are at the point of no return now. Unchecked carbon pollution is forcing the world's most vulnerable on a frog march to destruction now.
Not good. This is, in essence, a devastating report. And if you look at the bright side of it is, yes, act now. But is the world acting now? Are people giving this the urgency that it requires? Are we capable of acting now? Yes. Do we have the technology immediately to deploy? Yes, we do, to start doing what we need to do. I'm done with fossil fuels, Brian Stockton. I am just freaking had it with governments around here and in North America and around the world and oil company apologists. You're done. We cannot give an inch to oil and gas anymore. We need a basic supply to heat our homes, but we need to transition now. There's no reason not to. Why not do it now? Why not create a green economy with trillions of dollars changing hands and people having good jobs? Let's do it now for a better world. We can't wait another second. That's what this is saying.
Hear, hear.
So it is an atlas of human suffering, an indictment of a criminal abdication of leadership. But does anyone even know the climate report came out, given world events?
I didn't know until you told me.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You're serious? You?
Yeah.
Brian Stockton?
Me?
You?
I don't know. I'm still reading all the clean energy news, but somehow
Here's what I'm thinking. You got to get off this espresso machine. This god-awful, $1 million, what is it, $1 million? $100,000 is a very expensive espresso machine.
Yeah.
It's putting caffeine into your veins, and then you can't handle the world. You need to, rake down the caffeine, because the world's getting worse. It's not getting better. It's only getting worse. You're just going to be in your bomb shelter 24/7. And I envy you, because you have a bomb shelter. Not many people do. Yours is a residential bomb shelter at the bottom of your house that was built in the early 60s in the Cold War, which we apparently are back in now. So good for you. Who knew you'd need it?
I've made my choices, and I'm going to stick to them.
Yeah, the sub-Saharan Africa, they're going to require agriculture and food system adaptation at $15 billion a year. Half the world is impacted by climate change right now, and damage from not adapting to worsening conditions could be $200 billion a year. That's 15. So acting is 15. Not acting 200, but no one cares. They just don't care. No one's listening.
I forget the name of the town, but there was a story this week. Of course, here in Canada and British Columbia, we had massive flooding and fires this past year. And there's a town in BC now that has decided to buy out a bunch of people's houses and properties because it's just not worth it. There's just too much flood risk for them to continue living there and continually rebuilding and getting flooded and rebuilding. So, these are the direct costs of climate change.
Well, I'm going to breeze through some of the findings of the latest report. The effects of melting glaciers and thawing permafrost in some areas are approaching irreversibility. It was not a good word when it comes to climate. It is a bad word. We have to do something now. We have to mobilize to change the political landscape into thinking that this is a top priority if nukes aren't falling from the sky in the next couple of days. So half the world is already living with severe water scarcity during part of the year. A worldwide rise in heat-related illness and death with more foodborne and infectious disease can be expected without adaptation. Hopefully no more freaking SARS or, COVID and pandemics because of that, but who knows? I mean, that would be unbearable. So agricultural productivity growth has slowed, and weather extremes have put millions of people's food security at risk. Inland ecosystems, many as 14% of animal species studied, will likely face a very high risk of extinction at a warming level of 1.5. And that's the good case scenario. Right there. That's the good case. That's 14% facing extinction under the best case scenario. That's us acting now in a big way. And that's not going to happen. Choices made in the next decade will determine how much hardship we can avoid. Warming beyond that level would cause unavoidable increases in multiple climate hazards, the authors write. Clawing temperatures back down after passing 1.5 is an extremely difficult task and would leave potentially irreversible damage. Brian, I don't know what else to say other than we have to move on because we can only take so much bad news in 1 week. All right, here's a happy little story. Montreal-based bus builder, Latenda ZEV or ZEV, depending on where you live, has unveiled a new electric bus designed specifically for cold weather. Now, this fascinates me because, buses have a lot of volume of air, and it's really hard to heat that air with electricity because it's such a large volume. And school buses that have been tested in Alaska found that problem, that they're hard to heat. So I was very curious about this when I saw these headlines come out. Their new electric bus is designed specifically for cold weather. How? We'll get into that. They haven't been too clear about it, but I've got a few clues here. The first model to arrive will be a mini bus called the Electrip, which is designed as a city bus. It looks kind of weird. It's got a sort of a hood on the front instead of a blunt end. But the wheels are pushed right to the ends, and so that opens up the space inside for wheelchairs and other uses. So the Electric is about 9 meters long and 45 passengers, 24 seats, room for up to 6 wheelchairs. The manufacturer refers to the redesigned geometry to provide comfort and maneuverability. Here's a cool thing that I've not seen before and that electric bus can do. The rear wheels crab. Like in the Humvee and supposedly in the Rivian and possibly the Cybertruck, although the Rivian is backed away from that for now. So you get a really strong, tight turning radius for a bus. So that's very interesting. That's something you can easily do with electric powertrains. So Cummins will be providing the e-bus or the drive for it. Electric drive, and the batteries will install 3 battery packs on the buses with a total of 222 kilowatts hours. And there's supposed to be an underfloor heating system, which I found interesting, and it totally makes sense to me. If you're having trouble heating that big volume of air, you heat where the people are, and you radiate that heat from their legs on up, and hopefully that is a more comfortable situation. So radiant in-floor heating that is electric, or I don't know, they didn't say, but it could be a closed loop fluid system that is heated with electricity. And this is the other thing, thermal insulation, which you don't hear about in vehicles or buses. So that is interesting. You
don't normally insulate vehicles, which is a bit weird now that I think about it. All these school buses that we often talk about, they're terrible for insulation.
Yeah.
So maybe time to rethink that.
Yeah, no, on a really cold winter day in the northern climates, if you're on a school bus, you'll be cold, especially if you're sitting by the window. You might snuggle up to the snotty-nosed kid beside you. So, yeah, that's heated windows, too. You know how I love heated windows and radiant floor heating, and it's available now. And again, that company is Latenda ZEV. So looking forward to more stories about how they adapt for cold weather, because that's not something that people do.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that another story from a few weeks ago from Churchill, Manitoba, which we've talked about before. This is the place in northern Canada where you go up to usually look at polar bears. That's what people do when they visit Churchill. And as we discussed, it's customary not to lock your car in Churchill, Manitoba, because people may need to escape from the polar bears, and so an open car is helpful. But anyway, they have these things called Tundra Buggies that they use for tourism in Churchill, Manitoba, and it's to go out onto the tundra, and they fill up with tourists, and people bring cameras and they go
big monster Star Wars-like machines.
Yeah, it is very much like a Star Wars machine. It's just a large bus with gigantic kind of, monster truck kind of wheels on it. Anyway, they've got 12 of these up there in Churchill, Manitoba, and they're going to replace them all with electric. They're all currently diesel powered, but they've started plans to replace all of them with electric versions. And this really makes a lot of sense in terms of ecotourism, if you think about it, because you don't want to be going up north and just burning a bunch of diesel fuel and blasting it in the faces of the polar bears.
That's true.
And of course, the people visiting these places are often very eco-conscious tourists, and it'll just be better. It'll be quieter all those sort of same reasons that we talked about with the Army. It'll just be quieter and gentler and nicer for everybody, the people and for the polar bears.
All right, Brian, we are running really long this week, so I want to jump into the mailbag if you don't mind. This is from Facebook, actually, because remember, I was talking about last week how I was discouraged about this one city on the major highway near us that remarkably has 3 different EV chargers, because we're late to the game here, but it has 3 different gas stations or places where there's supercharging, fast charging, not including Tesla, but Tesla is also there. And none of them were working for people earlier in the month. None of them. Not any individual single one at level 3 was working, which is the fast charging that you want on the highway. So it says, James, I asked people about this, somebody who was stuck on the Facebook group, and he says, I was stuck in Swift Current on January 7th because these very same chargers were not working. I ended up staying in a hotel, which I say bad, you say fine. But if you're in a hurry to get somewhere, if you're going to, like, I went to a soccer game across the country, so I had to get there for the soccer game. Didn't have, extra time to stay in hotels for days. It was minus 30 going on to minus 46, down to minus 46, apparently, if that's even possible. Holy crap. Not only was it a convenience issue, it was a safety issue. In the 2 years I've had an EV and many 2,000-kilometer trips or 1,200-mile trips under my belt in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Canada. This is the one and only time this has happened. It does feel like a conspiracy, though, because I feel like it's more of willful neglect to try and undermine the coming change. And also, why can't there be manually override like gas station pumps? Part of the problem is the payment system wasn't working. So you call a number that's on there and they reset the machine, and sometimes it works. It's like a computer restarting. But you can't go inside and pay to activate the charges like you can at a gas pump. The tech is just not, it's problematic in that way. So the entire world doesn't need an app to survive. It'd be nice if they didn't, he says. So that was him.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, I think we talked about this before. I mean, I think, if you're buying an electric vehicle around here or in, say, North Dakota or Montana, you're still, unfortunately, an early adopter. And there's still lots of growing pains for the early adopters. If you're buying an EV in California, I don't think you would probably have these same issues, but it's absolutely true that a lot of these chargers don't work. They don't get fixed fast enough. There's not somebody immediately available to fix them. It's a real problem.
All right, Facebook Gavin, this is the guy who was stranded in Swift Current when none of the chargers worked. I asked him what that was like, and he says it was most certainly unexpected. He did not expect it at all to have to stay in a hotel, because I said, prove to Brian, who is away from the world right now, not on Facebook. I said, you tell Brian that it was not expected. It couldn't be expected. You can't expect to stay in a hotel. So he says, no, it was certainly unexpected to have to stay in a hotel that night. And I've only had my Ioniq 5 from Hyundai for under a month. So full of EV knowledge, but no firsthand experience, I mapped out our entire trip to Calgary from Regina, and every station was double-checked to make sure it was working before we left. So he did his due diligence with PlugShare to make sure the stations had been reported working. Swift Current was our first stop. Oh, sorry, he left from Moose Jaw, which is close to us, another weird city. Because of the extreme weather, both wind and temperature and elevation climb, we arrived in Swift Current with just 10%. That scares me, from being fully charged when we left. And I wouldn't say I have a ton of knowledge with fast chargers, but I've been using them for the past 3 weeks. I was so shocked when I found out that none of the 3 fast charging locations were working. So we charged with a J1772 plug. That's kind of what you would charge with at home on level 2, with one of the flow chargers. Only the level 2 was working. But that takes, a whole night to charge up.
Oh,
at
yeah.
Best.
Charge overnight.
So we ended up driving and leaving the car at a tire shop for most of the night with the fastest charging there. Thank you to the tire shop for having a charger. And we got a taxi around town to make the most of our stay. The next morning, charged some more at the flow charger, then headed back to Moose Jaw and stayed home. And to say my excitement of getting this new car is going on its first road trip was crushed would be an understatement. I know most trips won't be like this, so I'm trying to stay optimistic. So that's hard to read, but it's not everyone's experience. I mean, we need more chargers, and we need these people to be accountable for them. You can't just get a government grant and have them not work.
Hopefully the summer experiences will be a lot better. And that's probably one of the other issues, too. It's so damn cold here that these things it's probably more difficult for them to work in the minus 40.
Here's another one. If Brian is going to stay at Fort Francis, birthplace of James Whittingham, on his trip to Toronto, I recommend the Bayview Motel. Now, it looks like a dingy, one of those old highway motels. He says it's an old motel, yes, but it's completely refurbished and has been really well redone. Cheers.
Well, I'll see if the full self-driving in my car will allow me to go there.
I can't believe it. Why would you avoid Fort Francis? I mean, don't you have to charge there? I mean, there's a better place to charge?
No, there's chargers on the other route, so...
Okay.
I don't know. I'll look into it.
You'll look into it.
You pointed out a comment to me that somebody left on our TikTok, and that was about Stockton College in New Jersey, and a college named after me, apparently. But Stockton College, I was very excited to learn, runs on geothermal heating. They put in a couple of different systems over the years, and we talked about colleges last week as being an excellent opportunity because a lot of them have their own sort of closed systems for heating. So colleges are ripe for cleaning up their heating systems. And Stockton College apparently has already done this.
You know, when we take the podcast on the road and do it in front of an auditorium audience, that'll be our first stop after Fort Francis.
I used to check for a while the job listings. I thought, hey, I should apply for a job at Stockton College. I'd be a shoo-in, I thought to myself.
Everyone would treat you special because they think you might have something to do with the university or college there. So,
yeah, well, not technically, but I'm descended. So it's named after Richard the Signer Stockton, who signed the American Declaration of Independence. I'm descended from the half of the family that went to Canada that was loyal to the crown. Mm-hmm. So I'm the Canadian branch of the Stockton family. But there is a page on the Stockton College website where they're kind of looking at Stockton's legacy, and they are thinking about canceling him and changing the name of the college.
What did he do, Brian? What did he do?
Well, there was a lot of bad things went down long ago, but the one thing
That's
I read...
your answer? There was a lot of bad things a long time ago? That's your answer? Yeah. No, we have to research this. Answer. This is like your espresso machine.
Well, here's one of the things I know is that he did sign the American Declaration of Independence, but he wasn't necessarily the full-blooded patriot that they should be naming colleges. He kind of played both sides of the fence there.
Typical Stockton.
He was hedging his bets. Maybe the crown is going to win this one. So, that's just one of the probably many awful things that he did.
Oh, my God. We like to hear from you, the listener. Contact us and tell us about, some violation that a Stockton did to you in history. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com is our email. We're on Twitter and TikTok. Clean Energy Pod is our handle, one word. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel for special features, and you can even leave us a voicemail message at speakpipe.com/cleanenergy. Oh, yes, the lightning round! Oh, I like a good lightning round, Brian, and it is late in the day. Hertz has 100 Tesla Model 3 rental cars at San Francisco International Airport. Surprised or not?
No, I'm not.
I want to go rent one. From Bloomberg News, China aims to greatly expand its wind and solar capacity over the next several years through massive projects in the nation's deserts, according to an industry publication. A first batch of renewable energy projects in the interior that was announced late last year will account for 97 gigawatts. This is solar and wind in a desert, enough to power Mexico. A second batch of projects is coming too, and it's going to be in the deserts of northern China and inner Mongolia. But, they got to fold down their own coal. They're cut the investment in coal outside of China. Now they have to do it inside of China. Airbus plans a super jumbo 380. This is the world's biggest airline to test hydrogen-powered jet engines as they prepare to bring zero emissions aircraft into service by 2035. And executives at Airbus said they converted a test aircraft and it would fly by the end of 2026. So that's interesting.
We'll
fairly
see.
soon, I would think. I hope they're not late on that. Waymo will soon start asking riders in San Francisco to pay for rides. Right now, they're getting it free, testing out their driverless vehicles. But then soon you'll be paying for it, and it's going to become, normalized. Okay. Uh-oh, Brian. I'm just getting this is breaking news. Putin is a dickhead. Moving on. Tesla may seek federal funds to open supercharger network to the public. So they're going to ask the government for some money to do this. In the comments to Federal Highway Administration, it seems that Tesla hopes rebates if they're opening fast charging network to the. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised, but of course there have been many announcements about billions of dollars going to things like car charging in the U.S. So if there's billions of dollars available, it would make sense for Tesla to get some of it. They've already built the biggest charging network. So, better get some of that money for themselves as opposed to just letting it go to all these other chargers that maybe don't work.
From Clean Technica, Car of the Year in Europe in 2022 is yet again an EV. It's the Kia EV6. Have you formulated any thoughts on EV6 yet?
Yeah, I like that car a lot. It's, of course, it's very similar to the Ioniq 5, but those are two great cars. They're very similar. I'm not sure how they would pick between the Kia and the Hyundai, but apparently they picked the Kia.
I like the Ioniq 5 better. I just like the styling. From Inside EVs, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 noted 2,555 units in the second full month of customer deliveries. And that's a pretty strong number. 4.9% of the total Hyundai volume is that car. So that's pretty significant.
That's decent, yeah.
And it's comparable to what the Mustang Mach-E monthly results were last year in 2021. 17.5 gigawatts of floating offshore wind is planned for the Oregon coast. This is something we see in Europe, floating offshore wind. And it's interesting because, it's hard. The bedrock is deep and covered in miles of sand. So it's not easy to put a wind turbine up there. Kimball Musk, Tesla was very ignorant of Bitcoin's environmental impact. I mean, it seemed pretty obvious to me. I don't know why they overlooked that.
They must have stopped reading the news.
Kagoro, we've talked about them before, is going big with their 1 millionth battery swappable battery. You remember those battery swaps that go into scooters in... It's such a great system. It's like this little bread maker bucket, and it's got a handle on it. You put it in this big vending machine that's outside a 7-Eleven. You pull out another one. You don't have to do anything. Because it knows what battery you had, it knows who you are. You just swap it out and you continue your journey. You put one or two of them in. Anyway, here's something new. The Ford Charge Station Pro has been announced. The pricing has been announced. It acts as both a charging station in your garage or driveway and a bidirectional charger. This is to go with the Ford F-150 Lightning all-electric pickup. It's going to be only $1,310.
That's not bad. So that's the thing you'll need to power your house off of your vehicle.
Right. That's two-way charging, Brian. I estimated it to be 3 times that at least. So that's because usually they are. I don't have any insight. It's just usually when Nissan or somebody has one of those things in Japan, that's how much they are. They're very expensive. So that's our time for this week. Thanks for listening. It's been a tough week, Brian. I'm going to leave you on a note from our listener, Don, who tweeted us. He says, I know we know, but others need to learn this. This is from Michael Thomas. He retweeted, the last line of the latest IPCC report says it all. Climate change is a threat to human well-being and planetary health. Any further delay will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all of us. So get to work, everyone. Tell your friends and family, spread the word about the climate, and spread the word about our podcast, if you don't mind, on social media or to your friends or however you do that. And we'll see you again next week on the Clean Energy Show.
See you next week.